Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week. And as always, this week in data breaches, absolutely nuts, but hey, this is why we have scotch, right? So with that, let's dive in. And as always, I want to thank the following people that sent me a lot of this information. And that would be Joe DiBiase, Jacqueline Wolf, Marcus Ham, John Furdy, and Faisal Awad. And with that, let's dive in and let's start in Italy, talking about the football club Bologna FC. Now, they got hit by Ransom Hub with a ransomware attack, and this was obviously not good. They got hit on November 19th, or rather, this is when the data was dumped out, and Ransom Hub is claiming the following information: sponsorship contracts and sponsor details, complete financial data on the club's history, personal and confidential player data, transfer strategies for new and young players, confidential data of fans and employees, data on young athletes, that's awesome, medical records, information on structures and stadiums, commercial strategies, and business plans. So heads up to you. If you work, love, or sponsor Bologna FC, you might want to check in. Moving on. Let's talk about the push-to-talk app Zello. You may remember Zello from like 5 to 7 years ago or so during a Florida hurricane when a lot of infrastructure was knocked out. I can't remember which. And Zello was one of those apps that was keeping people communicating with everybody, including family outside the area. So obviously a good thing, but you know why we're here. They are now warning users to change their passwords. Now, they did not state why, so this could be some database update. This could be some breach. We don't know. Obviously, we're going to assume the worst here on breaches of the week because, well, that's my tinfoil hat job. And so heads up to you. Basically, if you have Zello, change your password. You know I'll keep you up to date, and I'm hoping I don't have to say anything, but it was a database update. Moving on, let's do our mini segment real quick. Simply entitled, if you just spent money on cybersecurity, you wouldn't be getting sued and you wouldn't be losing your reputation. And with that, let's start in Poland with the American Heart of Poland. Now, the president of the Personal Data Protection Office in Poland has imposed a fine of 330,000 euros for violating multiple articles of GDPR. And in other words, they've been ordered to basically come up with compliance because they had a data breach, and now they're getting fined. So heads up to you, if you use the American Heart of Poland, obviously in the country of Poland, and I do have European listeners. So with that, let's come back to the United States and talk about the stock trading app Robinhood. Now, they were just hit with a proposed data privacy class action about a month or so after their cyber attack that exposed about 1 million, or actually rather millions of people from their app, rather their users. Now, the plaintiffs are seeking $5 million in damages. And the longest law firm I've probably ever mentioned here on Breaches of the Week, Milberg, Coleman, Bryson, Phillips, Grossman, and Kopelitz-Ostrow, have filed a complaint in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California on November 22nd. They're alleging negligence, breach of implied contract, unjust enrichment, and violations of California's unfair competition law and Consumer Privacy Act. The plaintiffs are currently numbering basically at least 100 at the moment and are expected to grow. Counsel has not appeared for Robinhood as of basically about a week ago or so, so maybe they have now, but either way, not good. If you're a Robinhood user, you know, I'll keep you up to date here. You might be getting paid in the distant future. Moving on, let's talk about air ambulance company Air Methods. They just agreed to pay $240,000 to resolve claims that they failed to prevent a November 2023 data breach that compromised their patients' data. Now, Air Methods settlement includes benefits to individuals who received direct notice that their personal information may have been compromised. This data breach reportedly occurred when a criminal stole a laptop containing sensitive patient information. And this is why you encrypt all your stuff, your phones, your laptops, anything. If they had simply encrypted the laptop when it was stolen, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And with that, according to the plaintiffs, according to their class action, Air Methods is responsible for this incident because they should have implemented reasonable security controls, like encrypting your dang laptop. So make sure you're doing that. If you have Windows enabled BitLocker, Apple, you've got the privacy thing, so knock yourself out. With that, let's keep going, and this is a big one. Let's talk about Equifax. You may have received a letter recently in the mail or possibly an email saying that you're entitled to compensation. Well, every time one of these things is announced, guess what the phishing scammers do? They start sending you fake Equifax emails or even possibly letters in some cases. So Let's talk about how you verify if this is 100% legit. Step 1, visit the actual official eligibility website. That website is eligibility.equifaxbreachsettlement.com. Again, that's eligibility.equifaxbreachsettlement.com. The second step is to enter some of your information to actually verify that you are who you say you are. They're going to want a chunk of your social security number, some other things, et cetera, et cetera. But again, if you're going to eligibility.equifaxbreachsettlement.com, that's where you would do that. On top of it, verify your notification. If their eligibility tool confirms that you were indeed affected by this breach, the notification you received is most likely legitimate. However, double check that the email address matches one of these two. The first one is info@equifaxbreachsettlement.com. Again, it matches the eligibility.equifaxbreachsettlement.com. And the other one is distribution@equifaxbreachsettlement.com. So info at or distribution at equifaxbreachsettlement.com. That letter provides clear instructions then for pointing you to the official settlement website. And so again, eligibility.equifaxbreachsettlement.com. And I want you to go get paid because quite frankly, they're jerks for getting all of us hit. Moving on, let's talk about the Valley Pecan Company, aka Green Valley, based out of Arizona. They failed to protect customer data and compromise their personal information according to this class action lawsuit. Now, the lawsuit also claims that Green Valley could have prevented or mitigated this because that's always what they claim, and the pecan producer hasn't admitting any wrongdoing, but they've agreed to pay an undisclosed amount of information, and if you had serious damages, meaning like an identity theft scam, you may be entitled to up to $400 in compensation for your trouble. So heads up to you if you buy pecans from Valley Pecan or Green Valley. Here we go. Moving on, let's talk about both Geico and Travelers. They're two separate entities, but the article I've got combined them together. And they're both sitting out of New York because basically New York's Attorney General, Letitia James, who is always going after these people for the record. Quite frankly, she's got quite a stellar track record of suing the bejesus out of large companies for data breaches. Anyway, she fined both of these insurance giants, Geico and Travelers, basically a combined $11.3 million for data breaches that expose the personal information of over 120,000 individuals during the pandemic. Now, the data breaches at both of these organizations reveal security gaps that obviously they should have fixed. Moving on, Bojangles restaurants. I cannot remember the last time I was at a Bojangles. It was definitely in the South. Now, they didn't sufficiently protect their information of their customers, leading to a data breach, and this is according to a pair of proposed class actions. Now, the restaurant chain allegedly failed to spend sufficient resources on encrypting sensitive data, preventing external access, detecting outside infiltration, training its employees on cybersecurity, and this is all according to that lawsuit in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of North Carolina. Now, the criminals accessed Bojangles systems between February 19th through March 12th of this year, and copy filed out pertaining that had sensitive personal information pertaining to patrons. So heads up to you if you've eaten at a Bojangles, and I have not in the last year or so, but then again, I'd probably still be in their system from years ago, wouldn't I? Such is life. And with that, that is the end of the mini segment. If any of them had just paid for cybersecurity, they wouldn't be getting sued, and they definitely wouldn't be ruining their reputation, at least in my eyes. Moving on, let's talk about Alder Hey Children's Hospital in Liverpool in the UK. The Inc. ransomware group said that they published screenshots of data on the dark web that contained personal information of their patients, donations from benefactors, and procurement information as well. Sources confirm the snapshots of spreadsheets purporting to be from Alder Hay's systems basically were there, and it is evidence of large-scale data. There were 11 screenshots understood to contain names, addresses, medical reports, and financial papers. Alder Hey, for the record, treats more than 450,000 patients, making it one of Europe's busiest children's hospitals. And quite frankly, I hope you guys in Liverpool are okay. This absolutely sucks. I hate data breaches. It's 1,000 times worse in my eyes when it involves children's data. I mean, no honor among thieves. Moving on. Let's talk about Spring EQ. On November 21, they filed with California after discovering unauthorized party access an employee's email address. Sensitive information was hit. I do not have a listing of what that is, but Spring EQ is sending out letters. Moving on, Texas Tech Health Sciences Center. Officials with Texas Tech in El Paso basically said that patient information was breached during a data attack. They basically dealt with a temporary disruption in September, and that's when this happened. The investigation confirms it was a cybersecurity incident that happened between September 17 and September 29. And we're talking about names, dates of birth, address, driver's license number, government issued IDs, financial account information, health insurance information, and medical information, including medical records, numbers, billing claims data, and diagnosis treatment information. So if anything to do with Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center El Paso and Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center in general, heads up to you. Moving on. Physicians Primary Care of Southwest Florida on November 14th, they filed with Health and Human Services after they basically had an unauthorized person in their network, and they explained that consumer sensitive information was hit. I do not have a listing, but the Physicians Primary Care of Southwest Florida is notifying basically whoever they need to notify. Moving on, let's talk about Cloudflare. Yes, Cloudflare, the massive global CDN and infrastructure provider, and they do a whole bunch of other stuff too, but everybody knows them for their content delivery network capabilities. They've admitted that they broke their own logging as a service with bad software update that resulted basically in the loss of customer data. Essentially, they admitted this past Tuesday, about a week ago, so in a post, that for roughly 3.5 hours on November 14th, their log service did not send data that it collected to customers, and about 55% of those logs were indeed lost. So, interestingly enough, this isn't a cyber attack. They don't have to be cyber attacks. They don't have to be threat actors. But what this is a breach of compliance law. If you are a Cloudflare member and you have something like SEC or SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley compliance, what you are required to have is uninterrupted logging. So essentially, they can ensure the regulators that nobody tampered with your system during that period. This is something now that has to be noted in a lot of compliance incident response forms, to basically say, hey, we didn't lose our logs. Cloudflare did. So if, somebody sold $1 million from that Sarbanes-Oxley or SOX company, when this happened, we can't prove it, especially if Cloudflare could possibly confirm that. So here we are, not a good look, but Cloudflare is back online, and that was a very temporary outage, but nevertheless, it is a data breach because they take many forms. Moving on. Let's talk about Northeast Spine and Sports Medicine. They disclosed a data breach affecting the PHI, or personal health information, of approximately 6,300 of what I assume are their patients. The rest is behind a paywall, so I do not know, and I'm not about to pay some, local whatever just for getting one data breach. But heads up, Northeast Spine and Sports Medicine patients, and I would assume employees as well. Moving on, let's talk about LCP Tracker. They filed on November 22 with California after learning unauthorized party access information on their network. Sensitive information was hit. I do not have a listing of that. LCP Tracker was essentially sending out notifications. So if you track all your LCPs, heads up to you, LCP Tracker got hit. Moving on, Silver Springs Bottled Water Company. I've actually heard of them. Officials say ransomware locked their systems out on October 2nd. Human Resources noted that data from between 2017 and 2024 had been copied out. I do not have much more information right now on that, but heads up to you if you work for Silver Springs Bottled Water Company. I'll keep you up to date here. Moving on. Let's talk about the Met and not the Gala, the Metropolitan Police in the United Kingdom out of London. They just apologized to victims of the Winchester honey trap scandal after basically they accidentally sent an email which named everybody that apparently was caught up in this thing. Now, the police force said it was referring itself to their information commissioner of the UK, over this data breach. The Met is investigating basically flirtatious messages being sent by someone calling themselves Charlie or Abby to as many as 20 people, including members of parliament, staffers, and political journalists. In other words, looks like somebody on the Met's dime was attempting to fish or honeypot or honey trap, I guess as the Brits call it, members of parliament, staffers, political journalists, etc., etc. A detective apparently sent potential victims an email updating them on the case, but inadvertently copied everybody involved in this that got that honeypot or honey trap email, revealing obviously the names and email addresses of all of those that were targeted. Maybe they can start a support group. I don't know. Never a good look, rather. Always a bad look, never a good look when the police are phishing you in some way, shape, or form. Moving on. SL Data Services. Now, this is interesting. This is kind of like the big NPD data breach, but they're a lot smaller, so fortunately on that one. Cybersecurity researcher Jeremiah Fowler discovered this breach, or rather lack of protection, on the files that were exposed, and these exposed contain vehicle records, court records, property ownership records, full names, address, emails, employment details, social media accounts, phone numbers, and criminal records. Everything was in PDF files, and a lot of it was labeled background check. There was a total of 713.1 gigabytes, basically 3/4 of a terabyte almost, of data in this database, and this information is no longer publicly available. So hopefully it's no harm, no foul. But if you've done background checks, or somebody's done a background check on you using SL Data Services, you might want to check in. Moving on, the Maternal Fetal Medicine Associates, PLLC, aka Carnegie Hill Imaging for Women and Carnegie Women's Health, on November 15th, they filed with Health and Human Services after discovering an unauthorized access of their network. Sensitive information potentially hit was names, address, dates of birth, driver's license, social security, credit card information, bank account information, and medical information, and they are sending out notifications as well. So, aka all of those, Carnegie, etc., good luck to you. Moving on. One Point Patient Care on October 14, they filed with HHS and said that 795,916 individuals were caught up in their data breach. And then again, they refiled apparently on November 22nd saying, our bad, it was actually 1,741,152 individuals, more than doubling their original number. Those notification letters started rolling on November 26th. So, 1 Point Patient Care patients, all 1.7 plus million of you, heads up. Moving on, Contemporary Information Corp. Interesting name. So CIC, as they call themselves, filed a notice with New Hampshire after basically discovering a data security incident at BackChecked LLC. This is a vendor breach. BackCheck obviously supplying, I'm guessing, infrastructure to Contemporary Information Corp. Now, CIC explained sensitive email was exposed or hit, including names, social security numbers, and driver's licenses as well. CIC is sending out notices. Moving on, the medical transcription company DB Inc. This is a supply chain hit, and as a result of them being breached, the Minneapolis Veteran Affairs healthcare system had to declare a data breach. 600 veterans in the state of Minnesota are caught up in this now. Full names, medical record information, and social security numbers were compromised. So heads up if you're a vet in Minnesota, but heads up if your medical company at some point uses DBP. My God, that's hard for me to say. And I'll be keeping up to date as more companies, rather medical outfits, declare as a result. With that, let's head up to the Great White North and talk about Canadian medical testing company LifeLabs. And this is actually an update from their 2019 hit. Now, a 2020 report detailing the hack of Canadian medical testing company. Basically, LifeLabs was released this past Monday after a court ruled that it could be made public, ending a 4-year battle during which the company sought to keep the details of the investigation secret. The provincial privacy commissioners of both British Columbia and Ontario said in a press release that their joint investigation report completed in June of 2020 found that LifeLabs, quote, failed to take reasonable steps, end quote, to protect patients' data and essentially any health information where it was reasonably necessary to do so. As Canada's biggest provider of general health and specialty lab testing services, LifeLabs performs more than 100 million lab tests each year, and contains a patient portal through which more than 2.5 million Canadians obtain test results annually, or residents of Canada, according to a summary report released by the regulators. So heads up to our neighbors to the north, you might want to check in if you're getting your testing done through LifeLabs, and odds are you are. Moving on. Atlantic Orthopedic Specialists. On November 22nd, Van Virginia Center for Orthopedics, aka Atlantic Orthopedics, filed notice with Health and Human Services. Basically, an email account was compromised. We're talking names, dates of birth, social security numbers, driver's license, state IDs, credit and debit card information, medical information, and health insurance information. Atlantic Orthopedic is sending out letters to those affected, which totals 15,264. Moving on, Radiologic Medical Services on November 11, they filed with U.S. Health and Human Services as well. And Radiologic Medical Services basically said this incident impacted consumer information. I do not have any more information beyond that, other than they are also sending out notifications. I'll keep you up to date. Moving on, Visiting Physician Services, or VPS, of Michigan filed with Vermont after learning that an unauthorized party infected the company's IT systems with malware. We're talking names, social security numbers, driver's license, medical information, and health insurance information caught up in this. Upon completing their investigation, VPS of Michigan began sending out breach notification to those impacted as well. Moving on. Doman, Ackerlin, and Eddy, this is a tax, accounting, and business consulting firm based in Aurora, Nebraska, has reported that a data breach involving protected health information of 9,941 individuals has occurred. This is also behind a paywall, so heads up to you if you are in the Cornhusker state using Doman, Ackerlin, and Eddy, and here we are. And with that, let's go to our finally, because this is absolutely bonkers. Holy cow. Now, this is cribbing from an article that I thought had a pretty concise write-up, but was cribbing from Brian Krebs of Krebs on Security, and I highly recommend you go read that article. I am excluding a ton of stuff to give Brian credit, so you can go read it, but this is amazing because things with this Snowflake breach keep unfolding, and it's getting interesting. Now, as I previously reported on October 30th, Canadian authorities arrested Alexander Connor Mocha, basically following a request from the United States in relation to the Snowflake data breach. Another individual believed to have been involved in the Snowflake breach, named John Aaron Binns, was arrested in the country of Turkey. Binns was also indicted in the United States for the 2021 T-Mobile data breach as well. So Binns gets around. Now, we're going to turn basically to my cybersecurity homeboy, Brian Krebs, for an update from November 26th. So this is straight from Krebs on Security. Basically, all of what I'm about to say is taken from Krebs' article. You should seriously follow him and read him. I'm basically going to be riffing off him, but again, these are, for the most part, Brian Krebs' words. I want to give credit where credit's due. Now, there's a third suspect that's a prolific hacker known as Cyber Phantom. That's Kiber, Phantom with a 0 instead of an O, because, well, lead speak's got a lead. Anyway, I'm assuming he remains at large and continues to publicly extort victims. However, this person's identity may not remain secret for long. A careful review of Cyber Phantom's daily chats across multiple cybercrime personas suggests that they are a U.S. Army soldier who is or was recently stationed in South Korea. Yes, we are talking about military personnel here in the United States. Now, Cyber Phantom identities on cybercrime forums and Telegram and Discord channels have been selling data stolen from customers of Snowflake. Now, at the end of 2023, malicious hackers discovered that many companies had uploaded huge volumes of sensitive customer data to Snowflake accounts that were protected with nothing more than a single factor of authentication, meaning username and password, no MFA enabled. After basically going through dark web markets, looking for stolen Snowflake account credentials, the attackers basically began raiding the data storage repositories for some of the world's largest corporations. I've talked about these through breaches of the week going back for pretty much 2024 when this started. We're talking AT&T, which was disclosed in July that cyber criminals had stolen personal information and phone and text messages from roughly 110 million people. That's Snowflake. Wired.com reported in July AT&T paid $370,000 to delete these records. So here is where Alexander Connor Muka and John Aaron Binns comes into play here. Investigators say Muka, who went by the handles Judish and Waifu, as I've mentioned in the past as well, basically tasked Cyber Phantom with selling stolen data from Snowflake customers who refused to pay a ransom to have their information deleted. Immediately after news broke of Muka's arrest, Cyber Phantom was clearly furious and posted on the hacker community forum known as Breach Forums what they claimed were AT&T call logs for President-elect Donald J. Trump, then just running for president, and for Vice President Kamala Harris, obviously running for president as well. Again, this is before the election. So Cyber Phantom threatened signing basically their post with multiple hashtag free waifu tags, and I quote, "In the event you do not reach out to us at AT&T, all presidential government call logs will be leaked. You don't think we don't have plans in the event of arrest? Think again," end quote. And I did report on that, basically both campaigns claiming that they were hit and therefore extorted, both Trump and Harris campaigns, again, before the election. Now, on the same day as that, Cyber Phantom posted what they claimed was the quote-unquote data schema from the U.S. National Security Agency, or NSA. Cyber Phantom wrote on a thread in Breach Forums, and I quote, "This was obtained from the AT&T Snowflake hack, which is why AT&T paid an extortion. Why would AT&T pay waifu for the data when they wouldn't even pay an extortion over 20 plus million for over 20 plus million SSNs, or social security numbers?" And so this story gets super interesting. I highly recommend you go read Brian Krebs' article, but it is very much looking like Brian Krebs has identified a U.S. military person or persons that essentially is doing this, and they may have been stationed in South Korea. So obviously this hunt is on, assuming that intelligence apparatuses, and they're absolutely going to be on something like this, are actually following up. So Brian Krebs, thank you as always for the excellent work that you do. It's always a pleasure reading your stuff and also being able to talk to you in the past. So I say all of that to basically say this is Breaches of the Week. It has just been another absolutely insane week. And let's just say you were affected because Equifax is caught up in this one, and Equifax, it basically impacted all of us. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and now Blue Sky as well at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please, just please, attempt to stay private. Thanks, everybody.